Meat has been linked with many forms of cancer. What people should be worried about is fiber. Smoking is really bad for erections and the penis. And it does seem that message is more compelling somehow than cancer risk.
Welcome back to part 2 of our 3-part series, where we continue exploring the world of medicine through the lens of top experts. Let's dive in.
So moving more on to the diet and health. So as a GP, this is a real area of interest for me. I'm a big believer in preventative healthcare and living well. And certainly from my own experience, it's utterly sobering to see how younger patients are now being afflicted by cancers and fertility issues, be it, women in their late 20s with breast cancer, men in their early 30s with some kind of colonic cancer and so on. It's absolutely already happening, and diet is clearly an area of interest for you. You've published several papers about the co-benefits of plant-based diets for urological and planetary health. And in a recent paper, there was a 19% lower risk of fatal prostate cancer among men who followed more of a plant-based diet, which is staggering. So what aspect of the plant-based diet do you think is most likely to have caused this effect?
Yes. So very interesting question. I think there's actually two sides to this, which is interesting. So part of it is avoidance of some animal products. And for prostate cancer in particular, avoidance of meat and dairy. So the less of those that you're consuming. And meat has been linked with many forms of cancer. The World Health Organization classifies processed meat as a group 1 carcinogen, which means definitely causes cancer in humans. So sadly, this is things like hot dogs, sausage, deli meats. And it's sad. They're delicious, but I just don't think anyone should be eating it if it is definitely, this is the same category as asbestos and smoking. So I would recommend not putting that in your body.
Yeah.
Red meat, which includes, pork, lamb, beef that are not processed. These are group 2A carcinogens by the World Health Organization. So this probably causes cancer in humans. The highest evidence is in colorectal cancer, and I do think that some of this could be underlying some of these, higher rates of colorectal cancer we're seeing in younger adults lately. So I think, definitely reducing the meat and dairy is part of the picture of what we saw for prostate cancer. But then the other piece is increasing exposure to healthy plant-based foods. And it's so interesting because whenever you talk about plant-based diets, people are always like, well, where do you get your protein? And, that's really not difficult at all. There are so many plant-based sources of protein. What people should be worried about is fiber, because at least in places like the US and the UK, protein deficiency is not a major public health issue, but fiber deficiency is extremely common. And so fiber is only found in plants, just like cholesterol is only found in animals. And so you really need those plant foods to get things like fiber, which is very important for, reducing the risk of cancer and for cardiovascular health, not to mention, some of the antioxidants and other things that are in plant foods. So getting back to your question, I think the reason why we do see people who eat more plant-based and less animal-based having this lower risk of fatal prostate cancer is sort of a two-pronged thing. It's by reducing the bad animal foods and increasing the healthy plant foods.
And has there been further work in terms of deciphering, thinking about pesticide use and bioorganic plant-based versus, non-organic plant-based diet?
So, interestingly, in some of these studies, we didn't even separate that out. So still, even despite the fact that these people were not consuming all organic, these benefits were shown. But what I tell patients who ask about this, in clinic is look at the list of the dirty dozen. Those are the most important things that you want to buy organic. And this includes things like grapes, tomatoes. And so just Google the dirty dozen. And if you're going to prioritize what you want to think about for organic, it would be that list. And then not to be as worried about the rest, especially if, people are on a fixed income.
Indeed. And you've also reported that men with higher plant-based diet adherence had better quality of life and sexual and urinary function after prostate cancer treatment, which is again staggering and brilliant. How do you find that this sort of advice is landing with your male patients when you're kind of giving them this kind of advice?
Yeah, so we've actually published a few different studies showing that eating more healthy plant-based foods and less animal-based was associated with better erection scores in people with and without prostate cancer. I honestly think that lands the best. I mean,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
same with messaging about smoking, to tell you the truth. That's another thing where
Yeah,
smoking is really bad for erections and the penis. And it does seem that that message is more compelling somehow than cancer risk. So I definitely think that just, raising awareness that, eating meat is actually not good for erections.
yes,
So
yes,
all these ideas about meat and masculinity or something is really actually quite a myth.
yeah,
And, you really need to make sure you're eating your plants.
yeah.
And avoiding smoking to optimize sexual health. And this is because sexual health is a barometer of cardiovascular health. Those blood vessels in the penis are very small. They're smaller than the blood vessels in the heart or your neck, for example. And so when you're having things like atherosclerosis, buildup of plaques, inflammation in the blood vessels, it may come to notice sooner in the penis than in these other parts of the body. So we actually call erectile dysfunction the canary in the coal mine, because it can happen 5 years before somebody actually develops a heart attack. And so often it is kind of the warning sign that, the vasculature, my blood vessels are not healthy, because you've got to get all that blood in there to get a good erection. And if it can't get in because everything is inflamed and there's buildup. And so that's why what you eat and avoiding smoking, these really do matter, because these are how you're going to keep those blood vessels healthy so the blood can get in for the erection.
And I don't know about you, but I sense with my female patients who's hit a certain age, they are very good at discussing with each other, sharing sort of perimenopausal symptoms, what kind of HRT they're on, etc. I don't sense that men do the same when it comes to their erectile performance and so on. What's your take on that?
I mean, I think you have a point. There's definitely a lot of stigma and unfortunately a lot of undertreatment. And so
Mm,
we do have a lot of people who are suffering in silence with different forms of sexual dysfunction, whether it's erectile dysfunction or other things like
mm,
Peyronie's disease, which is
mm,
curvature of the penis.
mm,
And there are, a lot of options available for all of these things. So,
mm.
whether you're going to discuss it with your friends or not, I definitely
Yeah.
think it is worth coming forward to a health professional with these issues and getting help, because help is there. And so, like, I hope that more people will feel comfortable at least talking about it with a health professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly this end in the UK, Stacey, we have a very well-known athlete, Chris Hoy. You may well have heard this in the news, Sir Chris Hoy, who Olympic athlete, who's a brilliant Scot, a bit of a national treasure, but he's been diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer, terminal at the age of 38. And I must say, just by having that figurehead in the UK, sort of tackling the topic of prostate cancer has really got men talking and thinking about their own health, the health of their prostate, their urinary symptoms, and so on. So I think, I think things like this, they can be positive to get men talking a bit more about,
Yes.
men's health and related topics. And if
Yes.
they all move to a plant-based diet, how amazing, how amazing would that be? Um, Right. So moving on. So I understand your new grant from the Prostate Cancer Foundation focuses on plant-based dietary patterns and advanced prostate cancer. What are the primary objectives and study design of this project, and how do you hope it will inform patient care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so great question. So for one thing, we're very interested in looking at people who are at high genetic risk for prostate
Indeed.
cancer and seeing to what extent lifestyle modification might be able to mitigate that risk. And so that's one of the important questions that we're asking there. So certainly we do see that for example, plant-based diet and other things in the general population are helpful. So we do want to explore this more and people who, based on their genes, are at a particularly high risk of prostate cancer. Can they effectively do something to try to lower that risk? So that is one of the questions.
Brilliant.
Another question is really about implementation, both on the patient side and the provider side. How do we help people to make healthy lifestyle changes? And one of the big problems is doctors. At least here in the US, nutrition is often only about 2 hours of lectures in all of medical school.
Absolutely.
Which is just unbelievable since, of course, we probably know more about the quality of the gas that we put in our car than the quality of the nutrients that we put in our body. And people are looking to their physician for advice about nutrition, but the physician, most people just haven't been trained in nutrition, which is what is sad. So that's why actually a year ago, I decided I was going to get board certified in lifestyle medicine because I wasn't trained in it either. And I wanted to be able to really understand the science behind not only nutrition, physical activity, sleep, stress management, just how important all of these things are for overall health. So I literally undertook this additional training and now am board certified in urology and in lifestyle medicine.
Fantastic.
But that's literally like what I had to do because this just wasn't a part of my training up until now, even though people have been asking me about their diet for my whole career. And so part of the grant is actually to create an educational course for healthcare providers who manage prostate cancer, to give them some of this information about the science behind nutrition, physical activity, and lifestyle.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And music to my ears. As a GP, we often get frustrated because we get kind of 10-minute appointments over here in the UK with the National Health Service. And, to go through someone's diet, sleep, exercise, and a sort of downtime can often take quite a while. And you want to focus in on that stuff, but it's almost that the system is designed to get the patient in and out of the room and give them a prescription and off they go, versus really tackling that sort of more holistic lifestyle medicine piece, which ultimately is going to make them much healthier in the long run. But I think that's absolutely wonderful. And be rest assured that there's a similar issue, I think, in the UK, that absolutely nutrition, lifestyle medicine is a, 1 tutorial in a quarter versus, it's not a big chunk of the syllabus. And hopefully with this wonderful evolving evidence base, that is absolutely going to be changing. But I'm imagining that lifestyle medicine sort of certification that you have, I can imagine you learned things that you never imagined you would uncover when doing it. Did you sort of go into it thinking, this is going to be fairly straightforward? And I can imagine your learning was
for
quite profound.
sure. It's just absolutely amazing how much I learned and how shocking some of this was. People truly have been able to reverse their diabetes with intensive lifestyle modification. And by reverse, I mean no biochemical evidence that they have it. They're not on medication. Their A1C is perfectly normal. And so, and I think I always thought that maybe intensive lifestyle modification is too hard or might be hard for somebody to keep up. But interestingly, in many of these studies, the adherence is really good because the more intensive the lifestyle modification, then the more dramatic the results are. And when people lose a bunch of weight and they go off medications, that can be very reinforcing. Like, wow, I feel great. I look so much better. And so some of these responses that you see from people. Yeah. So actually my case study for the lifestyle medicine boards was a patient who I was seeing who was having erectile dysfunction and lower urinary tract symptoms. And the patient was taking medications for both of those and did undertake intensive lifestyle modification with plant-based diet and physical activity and was able to go off both medications. Blood pressure went down, lost a bunch of weight. So these stories are possible for people. And I think once they see those changes, it's very exciting. And then that provides intrinsic motivation to keep going.
That's brilliant. And just finally, before we move on to the environment, Stacey, have you I'm pretty sure the US is all over the GLP-1 agonist class drug in terms of helping with weight loss. Do correct me if I'm wrong on that. But out
Oh,
of interest,
yes.
are you seeing any initial positives for urological health
I
with
think it's
use of
really
the drugs?
early to see.
Absolutely.
I would imagine that it probably will,
Yeah.
just by virtue of the significant weight loss that people are having. I think my only worry there is, this idea of a band-aid and,
Mm,
like as a way to avoid doing healthy lifestyle modification that
yeah.
will be important for long-term health. And then,
Yes.
so are you taking a short-term gain and sacrificing because some of these nutrients are very important.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think the jury is out and we'll see.
Absolutely. Yeah, so they're doing their weekly injections, but only eating a couple of hot dogs a day. They're still pretty screwed. So yeah, absolutely.
And that's a wrap on part 2. Thanks for tuning in. Don't miss the third and final episode where we conclude this deep dive series.